Welcome everyone, this is Mike Clark. We're almost ready to start today's session. I'm going to kick off a poll here before we start. So please feel free to respond to the poll. Thank you very much. Be back in a moment. Okay, thank you very much for responding to the poll. I appreciate that. We'll cover that in a little bit here. But again, welcome to today's session. My name is Mike Clark. I will be the moderator. Today's topic is things developers think about but won't say to the DBA. And today I'm very grateful and lucky to be able to have a speaker, Andy Leonard, with us. He's a great speaker. I've known Andy for several years. Looking forward to today's session. It's an interesting topic, and it's coming from Andy is a longtime developer and earns his stripes in many different fields. We'll get into his bio in a little bit, but looking forward to today's session in a big way. So these things are online, and it's an affordable way to do it, but they're still not free. And so we have sponsors, and today's sponsor is HVR. They've partnered with PASS and specifically the database virtual group. They help support and offset a lot of the expenses that go on to run a volunteer-run organization, and we appreciate the support very much. Without them, we would not be able to do these kind of activities as frequently as we do them. We appreciate it a lot. PASS is coming up quickly. I know it's going to be in the fall, but if you register now, there is a discount. You can have a $150 savings if you enter our special code here. It's VGDISKGOE. I know that's a lot of vowels and consonants for you. These slides will be uploaded into our dba.pass.org website, and so you can pull the code off of that if you want to capture that. Or private message me and I'll share that with you for a little bit future. So it's $150 off. That's money that you can save your company, or you can use it for dinner while you're at PASS. And speaking of PASS, a lot of the general sessions have been chosen. Some of the key things are across AI for everybody, a lot of cloud data modeling, working with Azure data lakes for DBAs. I mean, some of these topics we hear about them, but as DBAs, we may not have time in our normal jobs to dig deep into it. PASS is just one of those ways that we can kind of pull away from the normal hubbub of life, of work, hopefully, and spend time putting our learning on and getting deep into stuff that we want to learn more about, as well as connecting. So you can register for PASS. Prices will increase. Actually, they have increased already, but you still can use that discount code and save $150. The DBA, the Database Administrator Group that we're part of right now, is part of a larger organization called PASS. There's many virtual groups out there. They're in many different topics. If you can think of something that's related to databases and some other slice of the data, whether it's a language, like Chinese or Spanish, whether you want to focus on PowerShell or security or cloud or whatever, that's out there. And if you have an interest in databases and something else, and you don't see that something else as a virtual group, go to pass.org and propose a new virtual group. You may just be the new leader for that and come up with a great new way to reach out and connect other folks in the field. So PASS is a volunteer-run organization. All of these groups, including the one for today, have been started by volunteers who had the idea and just proposed it, and PASS says, yeah, let's go with it. So if you have an idea, propose it, and then work it through the process. Another thing that's underneath the PASS umbrella is the SQLSaturdays. This upcoming month, they're in the four corners of the world, literally. So there's some in the U.S., Latin America, APAC, EMEA. They're all over. We were just discussing before the meeting started about attending a conference in Costa Rica. That'd be really nice. Get your tickets quick because it's this Saturday. But if you're in any of these regions, you can register for these SQL Saturdays and attend them. They're really great events. A lot of top good talent, a lot of good information shared, as well as, once again, you get to network with other folks. And there's different ways to stay together community-wise. I personally work from home 100% of the time, so being connected with a community outside of the office is good. And so I attend as many on local chapter things as well as online chapters just to connect with folks. So you can stay connected with SQL Pass. So to today's session here, again, the things developers think, but they won't say to the DBA. This is going to be kind of insightful coming from an accomplished developer himself. Landy, how's that, a combination of Andy and Leonard? Landy, I think I'm gonna run with that, Landy. Andy is the founder and chief data engineer at his company, Enterprise Data Analytics. He's a data platform MVP. He's creative a lot of different things. The demo, he's an SSIS trainer. He's a developer. I know he does guest appearances, training for Brent Ozar and other folks like that. So he's recognized in the community by top-notch guys as well. One of his biggest claims to fame is he's a farmer from Farmville, so a redneck from Farmville, I should say. So
that's right.
Yeah. So one of the neat things about Andy is he's written a couple books, and I do like the book of Managing Geeks. He gave that to me a few years ago, and I read that book. It's a really good read. Those of you that have had or will have the chance of working with geeks, which we do every day, right? Whether you are a recognized manager of them or not, you still have to manage the geek around you, right? So it's a great book if you want to pick that up. And if you bump into Andy at an upcoming conference and have your book, I'm sure he'll autograph that for you. So with that, they didn't come here to listen to me as much. They want to hear Landy speak. So I'm going to make Andy the presenter. And there you go, sir.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that warm introduction. And it's an honor for me to be here today talking to you. As Mike mentioned, and I made sure he knew prior to even submitting this talk to this group, I am not a DBA. I've attempted to do the job twice, and both times I quit before I was fired. I'm not good at that kind of thinking, so I have a lot of admiration and respect for DBAs. I am a developer. I'm a database developer and a software developer. And I sound a little different than I normally do. I know I sound weird most of the time, but yesterday I had some kind of allergic reaction and it impacted my vocal cords and my throat. So I do apologize for sounding even weirder than normal. Just a little bit about me. There's some slides here, but if you would like, andyleonard.blog is one of my websites, and Learn-More is a page on there that talks about me. There's also an About Andy page on there. I think too much about myself, I think, to put all that on there. One thing I'll share with anybody who's interested is I'm co-host of the Data Driven podcast. Frank Lavinia and I run that, and that's at datadriven.tv and there. Another thing that I mentioned on this slide is I'm a dad, a husband, dad, and a grandpa. And this is a picture of me and my children taken actually taken shortly after my dad's memorial service back in March. And this is my older daughter, Amanda, oldest daughter, Amanda. She's, as of yesterday, the official candidate for the Democrat Party in Virginia for one of the Senate seats. So she's running, and she'll be running on the ticket there in November. This is Penny. And Penny actually works with me. She's pretty good at SSIS. This is Stevie Ray and Emma Grace and Riley Cooper. Those are our children from the second marriage. And so I'm old, and so I gave them version numbers to keep up with them. So this is 1.1 and 1.2, and they are the mothers, respectively, of 1.1.1 and 2, and 1.2.1, 2, and 3. And this is Stevie Ray. He's the first child, the oldest child of the RTM wife, the beta wife, you know, that there was that transition there, and there's fewer bugs and a couple extra features. So 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 here. So that's kind of how I keep them straight. But they're awesome, and they're very interesting people. So I put this out on Twitter when Mike and I were chatting about this. I said, well, I want to push this out on social media. I got some really interesting responses. I share some of the tweets here. The first is from my friend Brent Ozar. And what I'm going to do to kind of rest my voice a little bit is just let you read these slides if you'd like. These are in response to the question, things that developers think but won't say to the DBA. And some of them you'll notice I've got the person on it. So others I didn't. I put the pictures and people up that I thought wouldn't mind. I forgot to ask permission. Grant Fritchie, by the way, is a hoot. So is Alan Hurt and Chris Bell. I think I want to get that name, Agile Water Buffalo. I like that name for a company. That could work. This one deserved its own slide. So that's a list of replies that I've got there. I have a story about related to the foreign keys that are mentioned on this reply here. I once had a friend who is a developer. He's less of a database developer than I am, more of a software developer. He does web dev and stuff. And he contacted me because he'd been hired by a company and they were complaining about the foreign keys on this database. And they were designing an application that would load data into a third-party database, mind you. And they wanted to drop all the foreign keys because they kept throwing errors, that the relationships weren't there. And he wanted me to provide maybe some thoughts about how to manage that. And I told him, I said, you know, he said they complain whenever they try to do an insert and they get an error back, foreign key violation. And I said, well, just tell them the database has your back. They said they wanted to manage all of that in the classes and in the data access layer. And I said, well, just let them know the database has your back. You know, if you put something in there that is missing a relationship, then the database will throw this error for you. It's actually a good thing. But we went back and forth a little bit. But the thing was, I was like, what are they going to do when they get to production with this? They're trying to deploy this they're actually selling this as an add-on for the product. And what happens when it starts throwing foreign key errors when people have paid money for it? And it kind of goes back to a saying I've had for a while, that all software is tested. Some in, some intentionally. So my personal developer experience, when I was doing pretty rigid software development long time ago, back before .NET even, I was an MCSD, and I heard no several times. I remember speaking to a nice DBA at the place I was working at, and she told me that's not the way we do things here. That was one of her comments. Now, whenever I hear that, I think, so did it change to this from something else, or is that just an excuse to remain static? And it's not, static is not a bad thing, by the way, in production. And then later a DBA told me that I used to be a developer. And my very first thought that I, to my credit, did not say was, and you're not one now because, and when I started working in data, I found that it paid a little bit better, and it wasn't quite as hectic in keeping up with new versions. There were new things coming out at a pretty higher velocity in the software development world than I found in the data world. But I managed DBAs and I was able to do that okay. But what I realized was over time, and I still realize this to be true, is that people are different, and this is really a good thing. This isn't a complaint. And when I'm asked to interview or speak to a DBA, and I am, companies call me all the time and say, will you vet this person we're thinking about hiring for the database administrator? I do not apply the same standards, and I don't have the same expectations in personality and attitude that I do for, say, a software developer. One of the differences is software developers, I want people for that role who are interested in changes, who embrace change. It's part of their personality. They enjoy it. I want a little bit less flexibility in the DBA because I don't want them trying crazy things in production. I want them to be protectors of the peace, if you will, and the security. I almost think about them like officers. Just keep the peace and security going. Be an advocate for less change and question everything. That's what I want in a DBA. The developers, I don't want that. I want the opposite. We all function in different roles. We all have different jobs. And that's kind of what I just covered in my last point. And this is a true statement. It's often difficult to understand how our jobs do fit together. So some proposed fixes for this, you can't beat communication. I would say over communicate, but that shouldn't be a real word. You cannot communicate too much when especially between these two groups, the developers and the DBAs. I encourage developers and developer teams, if you're practicing any kind of agile methodology, especially Scrum, ask the DBAs to join, to come to the meetings, because that's an opportunity for the DBA to see maybe a direction that the team is moving in that just might not be the right way to go. Plus, they can always point out alternatives. They may know about some new feature or functionality that the database platform offers that the developers just aren't aware of. And I think this is even a better idea. Have a DBA on the project team. And if you're doing Scrum, especially 15-minute stand-ups are not too much to ask. If they can save you hundreds or even thousands of hours of manual maintenance in the future, that's, to me, is the opposite of technical debt. That's a technical investment. Yeah. As the DBAs on their side, I would say, on your side, I'm not one of you, educate your developers. I've learned an awful lot about how databases work and T-SQL and performance tuning and locking and stuff by DBAs, from the DBAs. And, you don't have to set them on your knee for an hour a day or something, But especially when you're in one of these meetings, or if you're doing some code review and you see something that just leaps out to you as bad and wrong, um, have a private conversation with that developer. You can take 5 minutes and say, cursors don't work well in SQL Server. By the way, Microsoft loves it when I say that. I ask a trick question in some of my classes. Are cursors bad? I tell people it's a trick question. And the answer is no. SQL Server is bad at cursors. Other data platforms are great at it. It's not because SQL Server is bad. It's because all platforms have corners. They have things they do better than other things. And iteration is just not a strong suit when it comes to SQL Server. Have that conversation with the developer. If they're doing cursors nested 3 layers deep, it's because that's how they know to write a for each loop. It works fine in C#. It doesn't work fine in a stored prop. They don't know any better. They're not trying to irritate you. And this seems a little touchy-feely, I know, but there's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence. And when all else fails, I say try empathy. Try to put yourself in their shoes. There's a lot that goes with this. Assume that they're ignorant, but don't attach any negative emotion to the term. They just don't know. They don't know any better, or they would be doing better, I'm sure of it. And you can help them do better, and who knows, maybe one day they'll be able to repay the favor. I'm a little cautious about the plays nice with others sentiments that I see out there. I don't think that's human nature. So I encourage people to fight well, as opposed to fighting to win. And you may say, well, why fight if you're not going to win? That's a fair question. Fight for the best solution. Fight for future DBAs that are going to be managing this solution. Fight for future companies that developer may work for, future applications that they may write. And again, that kind of goes back to having a little empathy and educating those developers. And finally, I know this sounds cheesy, but strive to work together. Some of these people some of the really, really smart people that I've worked with are just not easy to get along with. And while I admire their intelligence, and this is both developers and DBAs, I really do admire their intelligence and respect the job that they do and how well they do it. Sometimes people get in their corner and they kind of get protective of that, and they just, they're just kind of sitting there waiting for something to come up that, isn't right, so that they can raise kind of a stink about it. And it's maybe it's a change. Maybe if a DBA feels that way, or a developer, and this happens both ways. I've seen it. In fact, the worst case of it was a developer that I ever encountered. And there's a reason why they're acting that way. And, if you just reach out, just keep reaching out, there's a good possibility that you can forge a friendship, or at least a good working relationship where you can exchange information. And that's kind of my advice at Fixes. This isn't an exhaustive list, but these are things that I found work well, as things kind of grow. And I warned Mike earlier that this was going to be kind of a short presentation because I knew how many slides I had, and also I know how my voice is feeling. So that's really it. I encourage any questions that anybody has here. I'll be happy to answer those. I know Mike is volunteered to stand in the gap and help us out here. But this is my email address and my company logo if we can help in any way. And some of the stuff that we're doing lately is in the DevOps field. So we're helping companies, especially if they're trying to implement DevOps and move to the cloud. That's hard to do both of those at the same time, but we've found kind of a niche there where we're able to help quite a few companies do that. And sometimes you get stuck with me as the person helping. So I'm just warning you straight up. I do consulting still, even though I own the company. But I have a great group. I know Mike, and he works for Mike, and they have a great group too. They do a lot of the same types of stuff. They focus more on database. We focus more uh, on integrations, SSIS and ADF. But there's I hesitate to call us competition because there's too much work out there for all of us to do.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as competition. We're all busy. Um, but if I can be of help to you, that's my email address. If you have some comments or feedback on this presentation, I'd be happy for you to send them to me, even if they're negative. It's okay. It's happened before. It'll happen again. And that's Mike. That's really all I have.
That's good, Andy. I do like the insight on that. Could you back up a couple of slides you have here? I
Yes, sir.
kind of wanted to hover on them. I'm not sure. One more, I think. Let's see. I just want to refresh. Oh yeah, shoot, yeah. This is pretty interesting. I do like this. So, I didn't go over the poll at the beginning. I meant to do that before we jumped into this. So the
Okay.
poll question was, I'm not sure if you remember it, but just to refresh everyone's mind, and I'm not sure how it shows up on the recording, but the poll was, what is your primary DBA role? And there's 4 responses. The first one is, I'm a production support DBA. Basically, I'm the one that they call when things go bump in the night. The second one is, I'm a dev DBA. I create the new objects and so forth in the development environment. I'm in DevOps. I treat the database as code. And then the fourth one is, I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. I do everything from top to bottom. So, so we had it's interesting. So there was, of those 4 answers, only 2 of them got any votes. 2 of them got 0. I've never seen this before. So,
Wow.
it's probably bad questions, but it's also the audience, right? But so 55% of it was, I'm a production DBA, and 45% of it says, I'm everything. I'm chief cook and bottle washer.
Wow.
So yeah, so we don't have any dev DBAs or DevOps in here. And so it's interesting because, Andy's coming from the dev world and, a little bit of DBA and whatever. I came from the dev world as well, fresh out of college. I'm a developer for a couple of large corporations and so forth. And as soon as I saw DBA, I got into DBA and I looked back at the devs. How come you haven't converted to DBA? So it's like, this is the greatest thing on the planet. Just the opposite of Andy's experience. I tried DBA, said, oh my gosh, why would you do that? Why would you ever leave dev? So, it's just, but that's the number one bullet right here. People are different.
Yep.
And people have different jobs.
Yep.
So when I'm a production DBA, I've been, one of 3 DBAs for 120 very prolific developers.
Wow.
I can't possibly be, and we did it, but we ended up doing a lot of DevOps stuff. I would go to, like Andy suggested, if you go back to the next screen, I would go to I'd have the whole team go to those meetings, the Agile meetings. My bosses hated that we'd spend time in meetings with the developers. It took about a year, but all of a sudden all this stuff started working. My favorite word is no. I mean, we're a DBA, right? It's like, I'm not afraid to say no.
Right.
But I tried to say something else. Well, okay, instead of no, how can we get to this better, right? Maybe not
Right.
now, maybe in a little bit, right? So it does take a while. And I think the first thing is communication. Andy, how have you seen it in the roles that you've done, a couple of engagements you've had in this? How have you helped folks transition from, the no stop sign, you block everything I want to do, all the stuff that you showed on the Twitter responses.
Well,
What are some
yeah.
things you've kind of encouraged folks to do to kind of to do a little bit of transformation?
Well, I can't believe I left this off of this slide in particular, but it's from the Managing Geeks book. I worked for a phenomenal boss. His name is Bennett McEwen. He wrote the old Sam's book. This is like back in the 90s. Teach yourself Transact SQL in so many, I think it was 21 days or something. He he was a great guy to work for, and I worked for him at Unisys. I managed 40 developers, ETL developers, and his team was over 100. And Mike, when you'd get those questions like you were saying, and the clear answer is no, that's the easy short answer to the question. But he would always ask a follow-up question, and it was, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And that is a beautiful question. I've seen it work in those situations where the answer truly is an uncomfortable no. But if instead of saying no, you ask, what are you trying to do here? And also, I've seen it work there. I've also seen it take the wheels off of a meeting that's gone astray. Just ask that question, and it kind of centers everyone and brings them back. So that's one really good example.
Yeah, I do think the workload overwhelming makes no be the first response. Oh my gosh, how am I going to find the time to do X, right?
Right.
I have to go learn some whole new discipline just so I can implement some little feature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those
I
are
see.
tough.
I see a question here from David, and it's a very good question. He says, "How did your budget accommodate the entire team going to a meeting?" And while I don't think that's what you said, Mike, but I think you had, certainly you could spare one or two DBAs to attend different meetings and track different teams as things went along. But I would like to reemphasize the value of, something I kind of glossed over, technical investment. If you can head off a bad design, um, or you know, substitute some better design because you're aware as the DBA of some of the new functionality available in maybe a windowing function that, or something like that, the developers just don't know or they haven't thought of yet. You can offer that kind of advice. And I am not making these numbers up. The total cost of ownership is a thing that a lot of people like to look at, or they say they like to look at it. The truth is, most of the time when I'm bidding consulting, I'm getting beat up on the per hour cost, not the fact that we can do things 2 or 3 times faster than the other teams, and we're only 1.5 times as much per hour. But the total cost of ownership of a project, everybody focuses on the development phase, but the truth is the bulk of the expense is in maintenance. And if you can knock that down, that's what a technical investment does. It's again the opposite of technical debt. Mike, what do you think about that?
No, I agree. I know when I first heard the term technical debt, I just thought it was some sort of a gimmicky thing. But
Mm-hmm.
the more I hear it, I do like that. But uh, the budget and so I view time as the biggest budget limiter that I have, right? I could always go ask for more money or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
With variable success of getting it, but I can't get more time. So
Right.
um, I do think that the more time the more I spent and there were a couple guys on my team that were very hesitant. They were already super efficient with their time. If I pulled them out for a little bit, it was terrible. But I made them go to 1 a week, and all of a sudden they started going to 2 a week, and then they started going to 3 a week, and their work didn't slip. So what we
Interesting.
found out what happened, and again, I don't have metrics. We didn't do polls and all this kind of stuff. We just did our work. But it was a matter of the developers got to know each of us, me, and I'll talk about myself personally. And so sometimes instead of showing it in a meeting, they would do that. I'm a big one, so don't put me on the spot sometimes in a meeting because there's a bit of that, right? Stump the chump kind of thing, right?
Sure. Sure.
So there's a little bit of fear factor. I'm sorry, folks. I'm going to say it's real. I didn't want to be exposed of not knowing the answer to something that the developer did on the DBA. I should know the answer. And so finally, I just say, I don't know what I'll have to go look. And then it would come let me know ahead of time, hey, I'm going to bring this up in the meeting. What do you think? So then it started being, they come over to me during lunchtime, or they would be out for a walk, for a break. I mean, so we start doing these things together. And then so all of a sudden there started being, now we had a lot of turnover. So it took, it didn't always work out, but
Right.
they got to know me, that how I'd work, how the team would work, how the process would work.
Right.
And all of a sudden, that little bit of time in those meetings reaped more benefit across the whole supply chain, so to speak, the whole development cycle, right? And we would code, automatically deploy, and then eventually we got to the point before I left to automatically deploy to production. No humans
Nice.
involved, right? And this
Yeah.
was a $1 billion application. We transferred $1 billion a week to this thing, and it was all automated, right?
Wow.
Only because of this. And being able to support it in production, I was like third level tier. If I got called, that means it was a bad day on call, right? And so we had fewer calls, fewer outages, fewer performance issues. So the budget is across. If you look at the bigger budget, it was actually, I don't know if it's less or not, but it was money better spent than, pulling out the fire hose and trying to solve something in production. That sounds cool at a cocktail party, but if I'm,
Right.
after the fact, but if I'm out with dinner with my family and I get a call, that's not so cool, right? So
Right.
long-winded answer, sorry to say, that's how I kind of did that. But
No, it's a good answer. Alex is asking, talking about build, ship, and deploy. It sounds like continuous integration and continuous deployment. And he's pointing out that it seems the developers never go through any kind of QA testing on their deployments, and is asking how do we deal with that in a positive way and not become negative. And Alex, that's a fantastic question, and I could send you a snarky little poster I made of my quote that says all software is tested, some intentionally. Um, some of it's tested when it's deployed to production, and that's just not a good answer. The other side of this too is as I've seen so many of these death marches and rushes to production, and it's a little bit more danger in that in the DevOps world when we're trying CI/CD these days. And I had this hanging on the wall when I managed DBAs a long time ago, and it says if you deliver quality late, no one remembers. If you deliver junk on time, no one forgets. You kind of let that sink in for a minute, right? Because this final state of the product that you deliver, whether it's tuning a stored procedure or a web application or a mobile site, if the final state of that you deliver, that's the long tail. That's what everyone's going to live with for the duration. And if it's crap, but you brought it in on time, nobody remembers that you brought it in on time. But if you deliver the quality and it happens to be late, no one remembers that it was late. And there's a few caveats that, and exceptions to that. There's some markets are truly a race. There's businesses out there where the first to market wins, as other businesses out there, especially in cloud tech, where the second to market usually wins. It's the second mouse gets the cheese, not the early bird gets the worm. So, there's a balance there. And Mike, do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah, I do, and that's actually true. We've delayed releases to production because, we would rush a few earlier releases and it was a nightmare to recover from it.
Mm,
So then we took that approach. But I think in the middle of all this is talking about developers never get QA tests on their deployments. How do we deal with that in a positive way? So
right.
I don't know how your deployments happen, but if they get to be automated, my goal I'm a baseball coach, so you practice how you play in a game. And so every deployment has got to be clean. If it's not, you fix it so it's clean. It doesn't go to the next environment until the previous environment does a clean deploy. And if it doesn't get a clean deploy there, it keeps going until that gets clean deploy. So there's got to be a process. It doesn't happen overnight. This took months and months and months and probably longer than a year and a half, to really get it to this way. But that was the goal, and we can't, we jump in and we fix it. So
Yeah.
but in the long run, it was worth it because now we can actually deploy a change. If we have a hot fix, before it was weeks to get it to production. Literally, if we have a deployment and it's bad, it's got to be fixed. Now we
Yeah.
can do an automatic rollback, one version, schema changes included. But it took a long time to do that. But it was a disciplined process. Say each environment, and some only have one or two, some only have one. That's a rough one.
Yeah.
But having each environment be automatically deployed or through scripts, but have it be canned somehow. And
Yeah.
then they just kind of promote through that. Again, it sounds great in theory when you have VPs pushing you down your back or the founder pushing. We've all had the founders or whatever, someone standing in our office, why is the site down or why has it not been deployed? But
Right.
even they will, anyway, that's what I want to get, practice how you play and get these clean each. And it's not going to happen the first time or the second time or the third time, but the more you do it, the more that goes through, the more you're going to clean it and clean up the
I love
process.
that, Mike. Practice how you play. That's a great saying.
Yep, because I used to hear coaches say practice makes perfect, and it always would cringe. And once I became a coach, I'm going, no. Practice doesn't make perfect. It makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect. Now,
Interesting.
I'm not a perfectionist, but if you're doing it wrong, you'll do it wrong all the time. You just anyway. So
That's really good advice, and it's surprising how many how many analogies we can pull in from sports and some of the economic stuff like technical debt, technical investments. Um, it's very surprising. So Rod said, by working with devs, I was able to use lead and lag functions rather than custom compiled assemblies. It makes upgrades and maintenance so much easier. Well, that's a fantastic example of what we've been talking about, Rod. And that I'm sure that custom assembly would have been no fun to maintain for that enterprise. And kudos to you for showing them a better way.
yeah.
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 So
Okay.
someone asked about the recording. It's being recorded right now, and I'm sure that it'll be out there at the virtual group DBA virtual group website just as soon as GoToWebinar finishes chewing on it.
Yeah.
It takes a few minutes.
Yep. Yeah, to be clear, this and Andy's slides will be uploaded to the dba.pass.org website by this weekend. And so we commit to having those up there that quick. Okay, with that, I think we've somewhat run through the course of stuff. If anyone has any other last questions you want to ask Andy before he goes, because the audience is pretty much production DBAs or guys who have that ultimate support. So if you have, and so you probably have some interaction with DBA devs or, those kind of weird people. If you want to ask Andy a question, how can I do whatever, then he's here. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up and send Andy off with a hearty thank you and hope his voice is doing better.
Yep, there's the email address. David asked a question, and it's fair. He asked that I have any other reading references on fighting well. I don't, and I keep bouncing around the idea of writing about it. If you go to my blog, andyleonard.blog, and search for that phrase, you will find some references in there. But it's been one of those topics that when I bring it up, it seems to either people dismiss it outright or they stop and think about it for a second, especially when I put it in the context of not fighting to win. And I use this a lot in mediation, in scenarios of religious significance. And it's, when you have a disagreement, where people value this even more than their jobs in these topics, fighting well becomes doubly important. And well, I say doubly, probably, innumerably more important. But that's what I'm thinking about. And one key piece of this concept comes out of servant leadership, where the leader seeks to be last. You see examples of this in the military. Officers eat last, leaders eat last. Non-commissioned officers or officers do. Simon Sinek has written about that. I believe he's got a book called Leaders Eat Last. And he's communicating these same sorts of principles here. And ultimately, I think fighting well is more about fighting for the benefit of the greater good than maybe the personal good. And what I've learned is if you try to mix personal gain with with corporate or enterprise or any organization's gain, what you end up with is personal gain.
Yeah.
It takes over.
Yeah, it's a side benefit, not so much a focus.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, listen to the people who disagree with you. I'm not saying do what they say, but do listen to them. And that's why I'll take any negative feedback that you have. And I promise you I'll read it and consider it. I may not do what you suggest, but it'll be on my mind. And it's the only way I know how to effectively lead. And I learned this really the hard way, trying to manage 40 developers. My joke about managing 40 developers is half of them think they're smarter than you, and half of them are right. Uh, they are smarter. So it's not about being the smartest person in the room all the time. Sometimes it's about being the person that connects the smart people together and facilitates the conversation, and maybe hears little pieces that, you know, don't immediately leap to the fore and don't appear to be that important, and asking good questions. What is the problem we're trying to solve? Why do you feel that way? Sometimes another question is, how am I supposed to do that? If you feel, especially as a DBA, that you're being pushed into a corner and being overwhelmed by, how many developers did you say, Mike? 20 or 120?
120, yeah, for 3 of us.
That's crazy. So yeah, it'd be easy for them to pile on you and overwhelm you. A really good response question to some of that would be, how am I supposed to do that? And then what you do is you don't think of them as your opponent, think of them as your counterpart. And you then get your counterpart trying to solve your problem. And this totally ripped off from a book called Never Split the Difference. And the guy's name just escapes me, but he was a former FBI hostage negotiator, Chris Voss, that was his name. And there's a video of him doing one of those Google Talks where they record people internally. And it's a fantastic book about conversations and negotiation. But that's his favorite question. How am I supposed to do that? He also says in that book, don't go for yes, go for that's right. That's the response you want, not yes, but that's right. And then you've got somebody agreeing with you about what you just said about their problem, the problem they're trying to solve. So phenomenal material out there. It's kind of hard to dig some of that out, but it turns out that, I bet Mike will back me up on this. When you get 120 developers, there's going to be 20 you never hear from. There's going to be 20 you hear from every day. And then the other 100, or 180 rather, they're going to sprinkle in a request here and there.
Yep.
So, yeah, I can't imagine that, Mike. Kudos to you for not going nuts.
Yeah. It was fun, but a lot of good skill there, but it took a lot of whatever. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I do like the idea. Andy, those are good thoughts, man. Servant leadership is what it's all about. Thinking that you're building something together and the values to the client, the customer.
Yeah.
And we're just the tools to help it. What's their experience going to be like? And so sometimes that helps, deal with that as well. How do you get to, how do you fight well? Well, because we're both fighting for all of us are fighting for the client, right? The customer to do well. If we don't do this well, there's bumps in production. Yeah, it's in my court more than your court probably, but then we got it that every time that there was a call, we had to get the VP of engineering on the call, and he'd bring in, okay, who's the developer who wrote that? Okay, he's on the call, right? So when your VP calling you, you're on the call. So we did that, and so all of a sudden now they had some, and I'm a skin in the game kind of guy, right? I don't give my kids I give my kids unlimited love, but not the car keys, not that stuff, right? They got to somewhat earn it. They get some there because we get some benefits because we're all the same employee, but you don't get SA access to production right away, right? When you're a new employee. So there's a little bit of skin in the game.
Yeah. So the big problem with the opposite of fighting well, fighting to win, is that sometimes you actually win. Yeah. That's a problem sometimes. And sometimes you get exactly what you want. And that may not be the right thing. And there's a really important old proverb that says there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. And if you're the only one trying to win this hill on your side, that is a clue. You need to think that through. I've been there, and I've actually been there and been right. It's hard, but it's also extremely rare. I can only think of one or two instances where I was the lone ranger on my side of the fence. But we have to. I think we all have to do this because the technology, Mike, is changing literally every hour right now, especially out in Azure. They're deploying things right now They've got stuff in public preview and private preview, and it is literally changing every day. And so the only way we're going to be able to do this is if we work together, and part of working together, I think, is fighting well.
Yep. Yep.
I'll write more about it, David. You inspired me.
Yeah, that's a good topic. I do like that. Fighting well. That's really good.
Thank you.
Caring about the relationship more than the results, I think, is also good.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I'm going to steal all. I mean, I'm going to
Crowdsource your new book.
That's right.
All right. Okay, with that, everybody, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the questions and interactions. It's a challenge to have, interactive discussion in this kind of a media, but I think today it worked out pretty well. So I'm encouraged by that. And with that, in 2 weeks, we'll be having another meeting. It'll be about, I'm sorry, the topic just flew out of my head and I didn't write it down. So we have a meeting in 2 weeks. So see you guys then. Thank you, everybody.